Good morning, Dr. Brad.
Behold, it's Kurt Doolittle.
You're looking very dapper.
I thank you, sir. As we rapidly transform leaves into forests.
Yes.
Oh,
we lost the intro because of an error between keyboard and chair.
Yeah, I regard it as instability of the platform, sir.
Okay.
Because they keep changing
Which
the rules.
platform, the biological one or the digital?
Yes, indeed. None other. Think that covers all the bases. How's the coffee this morning?
Well, because I had a weird blood pressure thing yesterday. I'm drinking mostly decaf, so it's okay. It's not decaf just isn't right. You can get decaf espresso, right? And then use espresso like regular coffee, right? And then you can almost get there, but
oh my,
this whole decaf thing is just not right. Anyway, so what we were talking about is I'm just going to reiterate for the audience before our technical problem is that Brad says, well, we're making slow, steady progress. I'm like, I suppose it looks that way to you, but I've been working at it for almost 30 years, and it seems like we're moving at light speed lately. When you read the 2006 draft, right? You read if you keep reading the 2009, the 2014, the 2016, 17, whatever it was, you sort of get to where you're like, wow, this is way easier to understand. And most that understand, in other words, the problem of solving the underlying problems was nowhere near as hard as trying to figure out over the past year, how do we make this accessible? And that's largely with Dr. Brad's help. Normally in the writing, you have a developmental editor to try to help you with that. In other words, professionals as well, the audience is going to understand this or not. You need to work on this, whatever. And so Brad's helping me in that manner. And so it's been extraordinarily valuable. And it's something I've known I've needed since the beginning, because even when I talk to, like when I make videos, there's a tendency for me to talk to myself and people like me, which is absolutely useless because that isn't a very big audience. Yes. So then we talked about some examples. Like one of the things that I've noticed lately is that while we talk about disambiguation and serialization disambiguation, in other words, into a system of measurement, and I talk about reducibility, it wasn't until we worked on epistemology the past couple of days that I understood I should connect reducibility and epistemology, and that those two things coming together sort of makes a whole new set of much better coherence across what we consider our epistemological spectrum, which is, which consists of the disambiguation, the grammars. Then we have reducibility, decidability, testimony, reciprocity, and demonstrated interest. If you understand those basic tools, that's sort of like our geometry, so to speak, our list geometry. So is the reducibility, which I talk about all the time, but and I always just assume it's really obvious that we're talking about that disambiguation is great, but then there's a problem, your competing problem of reducibility, which basically means, for example, GPT, here's a great example that's, if you're a technical person, or even if you're not, you've heard about this thing called Google's new AI, or GPT-3 is one of them. And GPT-3 is one of those things that searches the whole internet, and you ask it a question, it goes out there and finds it. Well, the thing isn't smart, right? It's just looking for patterns in speech, and since there's so much speech, it can find a lot what's out there. Scott Adams did a test the other day, so it was very funny. Is he ran one of a question against it, and to see if it could produce a Dilbert cartoon that was actually understandable and funny, and it worked, of course, right? Because there's a consistency to the pattern of Dilbert cartoons, right? However, what's interesting is the context is about 2,500 words. So think about that, 2,500 words. That's basically the size of post I would write on Facebook that would make an argument. It takes about 4,000 words to 5,000 words to defend an argument. It takes about that's why Twitter is so successful. You can't make an argument or refute one. You can just spam each other with virtue signals. So the problem with 2,500 words is think of that as your working memory. Is that context? I mean, in the context of a book, right, a narrative, you need more than 2,500 words versus of context in order to maintain context in whatever a question you ask. So the problem is your and my context is essentially whatever we've got in our lifespan. You know, I mean, it's just right. I mean, we can build contexts all over the place, and of course the machines can't, or they can't build context. And what GPT-3 doesn't build a context. Tesla driver AI does build a context. It builds an environmental context, right? That's why they know they can build a robot, is because once you have context, you can produce decidability within a context. But the problem with anything verbal is it's an unbounded it means basically an infinite context, right? And so the GPT-3 isn't building a scenario, right? It isn't building what we would call an episodic memory, which we would be able to organize into a series. So, the problem with reducibility is some things are not reducible. Like, can we reduce the universe to some basic fundamental laws? It looks like it. Well, looks like we're getting close there. Can you reduce human behavior to some basic fundamental first principles? Well, it turns out you can, right? But the problem is that some things aren't reducible without an extraordinary amount of context. And we cover mathematical reducibility here. We cover computational reducibility. We cover simulation reducibility, and we cover adversarial competition reducibility, which is survival, evolutionary reducibility. And some things can't be expressed in math. They can be expressed in computation. Some things can't be expressed in computation. They can only be expressed in simulation. Some simulations can only be expressed. Some simulations require adversarial competition. In other words, evolutionary competition over time. And then we have to be able to say, okay, those are great things, but those are ways of setting some descriptions. But then how do we reduce that? Well, sometimes the only reduction is the whole fucking novel. You know what I mean? There's no reduction available other than an enormous story. So what happens with reducibility is there's a competition between the means of reducibility and the context sustainable by the human mind without a narrative tying the individual states together.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you a question here, which I hope it doesn't interrupt your flow. I want to introduce this premise of the sensorium as a reducible function, generating episodic memory as the reduced sensorium.
Correct. Perception, what we call perception, is an adversarial competition between neurons for correct prediction, resulting in a consistent and coherent model of the world, right? Which we call an episode.
So correspondence to episodic memory.
Right.
When the sensorium corresponds to the episodic memory, we know what to do.
Correct. And otherwise, there's no, until we can, that's what meaning means.
Meaning, okay. I'm making notes here. It's just it's unusual. Anyway.
So when you have an episodic memory, the thing is, what we do is we store the equivalent of spaces and places.
Yes.
right? And so an episode is a space and a place. Now we have the ability to abstract this place and space into not just the space and place, but the other experiences we had in that space and place. In other words, everything is organized by this sort of contextual hierarchy that we have to produce in order to create something that's commensurable. So what we basically do is, it's sort of like a video game with rooms. You go into a video game and it has a room, and you sort of can remember what's in the room, right? And then you remember what's in the next room, but you can remember how to get from one room to the other, right? So that's wayfinding. But what happens as we think more and more abstractly, right? We're generalizing experiences, and when we generalize, we can leave out certain attributes. So we can, in other words, that's what generalization means. It means is losing information and concentrating salient information that's consistent across different episodes. So when I say everything begins with movement, I'm not kidding.
Right. So it will be this as frog perception is related to motion only.
Yes, exactly. And
Because
so
it's not relevant. It's ignore that which does not move. That which moves may be visible or runnable, weighable from.
Right. And if there's a danger, then jump at whatever's darkest. Right. That's how a frog, right? They're so simple, right? So on the other hand, so my point is, you start out with movement, and then we abstract away information, which is how we get to visualize abstract or think of more increasingly abstract things. But we start with what's called an episode, right? We eventually got to the point where we can now create episodes out of states of mind rather than states of physical presence.
Right.
And but it's the same function.
Yes.
Anyway, so my point was that some things are irreducible.
Right.
Right. In other words, the only thing you can do is tell the whole story. Right. And even then, some things like I'm trying to think of something, for example, some simulations or some adversarial competitions aren't reducible to anything other. Right. They're not meaningful. For example, let's put a whole bunch of things in competition with each other. If you run 1 million simulations, you'll come out with some basic statistic, right? But that's all it tells you. Right. The lions eat more, tend to eat the rabbits until there's an equilibrium between lions, rabbits, and grass. Right. I mean, not the lions, whatever, the wolves eat the rabbits.
Right.
Right. But there's so much information loss in that reduction. On the other hand, prediction. You can't say that at this particular geography, this right here, the rabbits are going to get eaten by the wolf. You can't tell. It's not reducible beyond the fact that over time an equilibrium will happen. Does that make sense? The individual states within the system aren't predictable. So in an economy, your behavior is not predictable in economy. It's only the mass of people in general whose behavior is generally predictable.
Right. So in my profession, it is the patient says, "Is this normal for this condition?" That is meaningless.
That's a meaningless statement.
Right. I can't predict what's going to happen to you. I say you'll tell me before I know.
So reducibility is a very important part, because it gets us away from the problem of, well, if it's not reducible to mathematical expression, it can't be scientific. That's just simply false. Not enough stuff is reducible to mathematics. I mean, mathematically reducible.
Right.
A lot of phenomena in art. And so this is the problem with the math being the gold standard. I would argue computation is a gold standard. Right, and not mathematics.
Mathematics is a proxy for computation.
Exactly, it's a shorthand,
and it's insufficient.
Well, yeah, you can't express everything in mathematics.
It represents a fragment of that which is computable.
Right. And so by adding that to it, we get out of so when you say are we making slow, steady progress? I'm like, I don't consider that slow, steady progress because it solves a fairly serious problem, at least for me in my job as an epistemologist, right? I mean, I have to be able to defend these things and give it. And when I look at something, I'm like, well, if somebody argued with me, I would give that answer, but that's different from me telling people in advance, you need to understand these concepts. So adding reducibility is something that's helped a lot, and it solves it's like that whole sequence, which is not intuitive at all, which is grammar's reducibility, decidability.
Yeah, you left epistemology out.
Excuse me, grammar's epistemology, reducibility, decidability, testimony, reciprocity, and demonstrated interest. That's serious.
And truth.
Well,
Truth.
did I say truth or testimony? I think I said testimony.
You said testimony.
Yeah, which is truth.
Decidability, testimony, reciprocity,
and demonstrated interest.
Demonstrated interest. But then truth follows that. No, truth is
truth is testimony. It's the same thing.
Okay.
So this is how we fix the problem of truth, is we separate decidability, which is right, and testimony. So we say, is it decidable? Is it testifiable? We get away from idealism. These are just performative actions. So we know something is decidable or not. We know that if is testifiable or not. We know if it is reciprocal or not, and we know if it is reciprocal on demonstrated interest or not. And so if we have all those criteria, we have all of human cognition in a very discrete set of tests, which is what grammar is being used. What epistemology what epistemology does that deliver to us? What reducibility does that deliver to us? What decidability does that deliver to us? What is testifiable what's testifiable, what's reciprocal, and what's reciprocal? How do we test reciprocity? But by demonstrated interest. Now, the only thing we have to add to that is cooperation, which is what is cooperative, which is reciprocity. So we build up from cooperation, and we get the ternary logic, right? Boycott. And that's all there fucking is to the universe. There's nothing else. It just
wait, that I want to translate Kurt's language, his vernacular there. Dude, that's all there is. It's like, it means that I'm sure that
everything is reducible to everything can be measured by that system of measurement.
There is no human experience that exists outside of that pattern.
Correct.
Okay.
And so we can tell what's true.
Wait, they would say this in
like
that's all, folks.
Yeah.
So, wow, Looney Tunes, right? There you go.
I love that stuff going up. I mean, it was funny. They used to go to the drive-in, right? To go to the drive-in.
Yes.
Watch movies in the 60s. And they would play cartoons before the movie.
That's very nice.
It was great. Right. And then we would fall asleep before the movie started.
Well, anyway, now we're all warmed up.
So I just want to make, again, so this is my life's work. So when we make extraordinary progress in what I consider a couple of weeks instead of a year, that's pretty impressive to me.
I have a question though, before we begin, because now that we're warmed up, right? We're all epistemology. We've talked about it a bit, but it's like you've separated into there's a suggestion by the statement you made. You said grammar, then epistemology, which is like, I understood epistemology to be the most general performative act of a human being.
Well, I think that epistemology is the attempt to science what we know, right? And what we know, what we don't know, right? If you want to say the epistemic process of learning. That's another conflationary thing. You know, humans are heuristic machines, right? We learn, right? Language is an evolutionary system of measurement. All language is reducible to some sort of measurement. Measurements are precise or not, conflationary or not, inflationary or not, deflationary or not, consistent. I mean, they're just measurements. And so the same way the universe evolves by continuous recursive disambiguation, our language follows the same process, which is continuous recursive disambiguation of sounds, symbols, into sequences of that we call words, syllables, words, phrases, sentences, and stories, sequences of sentences. So these are all just systems of measurement. They're no different than writing a proof, right? It's just the, you know, it's just another system of measurement, or writing a recipe. You're trying to bake a cake, you follow a recipe. You try to communicate in a concept, you follow a recipe. Your recipe for baking a cake might vary from mine, but in the end, we get a cake, right? Or we don't, and we say that I didn't understand. Or in the physical world, the cake doesn't bake, right? It doesn't rise, right? So it's the same process. So I don't know. I just view that. I view words as variations in a thermometer, right? They're just measurements, and that the unit people take. But then we have to say, we've constructed these things due to the necessity of grammar, right? But how do we know when we're telling the truth or lying? Now, how do we test the veracity of words? I mean, the origin of logic is European argument. Right? We're trying to make solid arguments, and we had to make arguments because we ruled by law rather than command. So, you know, we evolved this problem of how do we make arguments? Well, I mean, it's basically how do we test where something's true or not? And so when we say so we could say epistemology is a theory of knowledge, or you could say epistemology is a theory of how we test our knowledge. I'm going to go look up the way they say it here.
Sorry for causing this.
No, it's a great question because other people are going to ask it. The theory of knowledge, regard to its methods, validity, and scope. It's the investigation of what distinguishes belief from opinion, right? In other words, right?
So it's within a grammar, and it's a grammar is within the paradigm of operation. Is that fair?
A grammar is a paradigm. The grammar is the paradigm. Evolutionary computation. A grammar is a paradigm. A paradigm consists of rules and limits. But in logic, we call it axioms. In physics, we call it laws.
Okay.
And in metaphysics, we call it presumptions. So they are a set of priors. So we have a set of priors that are established
to be satisfied,
right,
within the operating system.
Right. So, you know, this is where the fictionalisms come in, right? You can start appealing to things that don't exist and treating them as if they do. Well, yes. So when you the study of this particular study is this, I like this, is it knowledge or opinion? Well, is it testifiable or is it not? Is really the question, right? And so is it testifiable or not? So I changed these terms from the very gracious Greek, Roman, and Victorian mannerisms to legal prosecutable terms, which is it testifiable? That's the question. And if it's testifiable, how do you know it's testifiable? And so that's what I work on. This is it testifiable? If it's not testifiable, you can't claim it's true. You can claim you like something, an opinion,
Right. So
that's
preference.
right? But you can't claim it's true. So, by breaking epistemology down into actions, in other words, what we've done is what we call operationalism. We end up with the categories I mentioned earlier, which is the hierarchy of how information flows through the process into increasing scales. So it turns out that this is whether you want to call it calculation or computation is a sort of interesting discussion, but it's essentially a method of computation. It's within the domain of computation. It has to be, because it's not introspectable bias.
Oh, say that one more time, please.
But the difference between computation and calculation is that calculation is the deliberate transformation of inputs into outputs, right? Computation is something a machine can do. Well, that's a really interesting statement, but you got to realize you can't transfer inputs into outputs unless you can introspect upon it. Since we can't introspect upon our intuitions, we can only scientifically explain how they work. That's computation. Does that make sense?
Looks like calculation, though.
It looks like calculation, but it's computation because we can't see it. So what's happening there is a very simple computation. Is this prediction? There's a loop, right? And that's what most of our neurons do, is go backwards, right? Because they're inhibitory. It's like, is this consistent over time? If it's not consistent over basically 3 beats, it's not a prediction, right? You're trying to predict something. So we want to see if what was coming through the last time meets this time. It's really that simple. And so we don't have to remember, we don't have to have intrinsic knowledge of the universe. All we have to do is repeatedly predict very common things, common occurrences between stimulations of different nerve cells, which result in different stimulations of neurons. So it's, I say, is it a calculation or computation? Well, if calculation is defined as deliberate transformation inputs into outputs, basically that's reasoning, and we can't see into it, we can't introspect upon it, then can't be reasoning. It can only be computation. So when we use our attention, we say, go compute this, right? We're saying, we use our attention to focus on something. We're saying, go compute this. Are we saying go calculate it? It depends on how you want it, but I'm sticking with the formal definition of calculation. And the calculation and computation differ, and that humans can calculate, machines can't. And because we can deduce, right? And we can do deductions and rules and algorithms and stuff. And computers can only do mechanical operations, repeatable operations. And so I just think, so what's happening there is this interesting question of what kind of is Bayesian computation any different from ordinary computation? Of course not. It's just an adversarial competition between computations. So Bayesian learning is an adversarial competition between different. What's the matter? Did I just?
No, I touched something and your image disappeared. It disturbed my sensibility.
Okay, so I feel like I'm being way too nerdy now.
No, it was okay. That was good, because it's like sorry to make you feel that way, but it helped me, and I think it helped other people too.
So I mean, when we say Bayesian learning, I call it Bayesian accounting for a good reason, because that's all it's doing. Is the reason Bayesian systems can work is they can keep track of more minute changes and more variables than we can. So I don't see, I just see it as, it's the same thing with Mandelbrot and fractals, right? You couldn't do fractals before, we couldn't do Bayesian learning before. Bayesian learning is just accounting, and accounting is just accounting for complexity. So that's it.
Okay.
That difficult. The difference is how do you know your prediction is consistent over time? Which is why cars work. What Musk's people do works. And what I see happening in the industry, which is all this pattern recognition, I'm like, that doesn't really take you anywhere. It tells you that this is a photo of a cat, not a dog. So it tells you, but it doesn't, you know, until you're like doing videos and creating episodic map constructions from a video, you don't have, there's nothing value. And that's what a car does. It takes video and it creates an episode. The episode is a momentary thing, but it can predict from that episode. Once you have an episode, you have categories, right? Objects and backgrounds and spaces and places you can move and bear, you know. And once you have that, you can create forecasts and predictions. Right? But until that, you're just like, well, you're just measuring pixels. I just that's
right.
It's not me. I was just somebody, I can't remember who I was listening to the other day, said, you know, we've been at this computing thing for almost 100 years now. And the guys who, and I'm not sure anything we did in other words, what we call AI, we're doing the same shit we knew about in 1950. I don't think it any different. And that's what I learned is that I got out of AI in the 80s because I realized it's a hardware problem. Right, there's nothing.
Right, we need faster, better hardware,
and our computers are built the wrong way. They're building neuromorphic computers, but you know, right now your dendrites are, you know, looking for mates, right? Basically, and they're out there on a search whenever they've got the opportunity to seek stimulation, and so they're out there. So the wiring in your head is literally wire. I mean, it can wire itself. But what happens in a processor is that you have this really powerful processor, and then it has to create virtual connections between data stores, right? And so you have to process that stuff, you know, in huge volume. Whereas the once a wire is connected in your head, I mean, it either gets fed by continued traffic or it starves and gets deleted.
Yes.
So you know, we've sort of built what you want, of course, is really tiny cores, right, that do very little. And you want to have either the ability to grow direct physical connections, which I don't know how the hell that's
so analog. The neural analog is not as good as the I don't even know how to say it. But this functionally similar activity of a machine to the operation of the neurons.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good imitation, but it's bound by the fact that, you know, it's electric processes in the brain are by comparatively slow compared to electromagnetic processes in the computer. But the difference is that they're direct connections, right? And whereas they only require 20 watts, right? I mean, that's it, right? Whereas the computer, when you try to do this kind of computation, you know, we have to create power plants for it.
Right. So I want to go back to 1949 when I read Norbert Wiener's book, Cybernetics, the Human Use of Human Beings. Very disturbing book because he invented the field of cybernetics in 1949. And I witnessed my nervous system behaving according to those patterns he talked about in 1949 when I'm like talking to the machines to cause the patient to get what they need. And I know the code instead of the terminology that I was taught in medicine. I know the and it's like this. It's like
it's not good.
No, it's good. Because the nervous system goes, the shortcut is this, the answer needs to be that, otherwise you don't get what you want. So it provides the answer because it's like, it remembers and it knows the episode. It's like, this is how you make this go away faster, right? Success, next. episode, please. Now, are we adequately warmed up to talk about lying, Kurt?
Yeah, I feel like I got too nerdy there.
No, you did great. Because that was, I think that wait, everybody just listen for a second. Hit that button there, like, subscribe, and notifications, and then leave comments and tell us, was Kurt indeed too nerdy there? Or, as I think, was Kurt appropriately nerdy and provided useful information that we can all grow upon and connect new dendrites to other dendrites? Close the synapses.
All right, so let's. Oh my
That was
God,
me signaling.
Now I got to change gears.
I just signaling the end of that little episode. That's all.
Oh, okay. All right, changing gears.
Right.
When last our intrepid adventurers were talking about lying, because we've had had to work on other things lately. On lying, and yeah, by the way, I really don't want to talk about it because it makes me really nervous. But I guess we're going to have to. So I wanted to
Wait,
talk
this is
about
when I signal that I'm here to allay Kurt's anxieties.
So it's one of those things, right? It's just anyway. So what I want to do is tell you what we're doing. So we started out with going through the sex differences, and then I got to say, well, the sex differences in antisocial behavior. And I said, we learn a lot more about humans when we study their differences than we do about their similarities, because our similarities give us false hope that we will be the same, right? Whereas it's just a wonderful thing that cooperation allows us to work together on the same things, despite that we're different. So how do we explain our differences? And so I worked on antisocial behavior. And so I was trying to work up to where I would do the female method of lying versus the male method of lying. Excuse me. I was just going to talk about the female method of lying. Then I realized, okay, Brad and I were talking, I have to talk about both the male and female methods of lying, because we take for granted the male-female methods of lying, right? They've been around so long, we just...
The men have been paying attention to the other men for a long
time. And so,
and generally ignoring the women, except for the ones that are most useful to us momentarily.
Yeah, exactly, pretty much. And so I said I would discuss the female method of lying. And then we just said, well, why don't we take the two of them and put them side by side, and we'll show the parallel and continue this, showing how males and females engage in different kinds of lies. And then we said is, well, we pulled our diagram up, which was our I guess it's a diamond now. When It's a triangle when it's good, it's a diamond when it's good and bad, right? Then we pull up our diamond and we say, well, the lower triangle is just irreciprocity, deceit, fraud, and war. And so what we'll do is we'll show that the males and the female lying are an escalating downward path on this diagram. And in doing so, we'll sort of unite the upper part, which is the escalating path of cooperation across markets, with the downward anti-cooperation at the bottom. And I'm like, we'll have this freaking thing is so explanatory now. It's just amazing, right? But the thing that wasn't so obvious to me, which was that really what I call the Abrahamic method of deceit, which is the basis of the Abrahamic religions plus in the old world and the new Abrahamic religions we call Marxism, neo-Marxism, whatever. These are a unification of female empathizing and male systematizing. And I've been rolling around on this quite a bit, because the bottom of the diamond is basically this unification of male systemic lying with female empathic lying. and you wonder why it's so effective. It's because it's freaking. It's like was a secret code. I don't know. It's like it's overwhelming the mind in every dimension, right? It's systemic and it's emotive, and you want to believe it's rational, you want to believe it's good, and it's just overwhelming. Of course, this is one of the things that we're struck. Can I roll on a bit? One of the things I'm struggling with is that we've always considered Judaism as the anchor for Judeo-Christian Abraham, Muslim Abrahamic religions, and it turns out that's not really true. It's that Christianity is the innovation, and rabbinical Judaism is an imitation of the innovation in Christianity. And just as Islam is a imitation of both Judaism, and it's just that the Jewish story collection is in the Old Testament provided this value. Well, help me.
Yeah, because this is interesting, which is my objection to your use of the term Abrahamic religions. And I object to it a little bit, and it's like it goes to this. It's I recognize the Abraham as having to by the stories, right? And I don't know how else to access the construct of Abraham, the identity. He identified the existence of the good God. And it's like, so Abrahamic religions stem from that. And it's like, I'm sorry to have caused a disturbance, but I have to. It's like the Judaic story or Hebraic story is stemming from that beginnings. And it's like there's a multitude. They're like dendritic in their functionality and how they perform in the stories, and they're frequently doing innovative things that are outside of the edicts that were granted them by the scripts that they have to read, and they're getting in trouble for it through the Old Testament. And I regard
I know, but I just look at the tech. I'm just talking about technology.
We're in agreement. No,
right?
and it's so I regard the Christian story, right, Christianity as an innovation, technology that was exportable to the Gentiles, and innovation upon the Judaic story, which was not. So it's good for tribal association and not good for generalization.
Yeah,
because of that.
I realize, and I just don't care.
I recognize that.
It doesn't. I'm just doing the science, which is, look, the good God is discovered by the Persians, not by the Jews. The Jews copy that. So what they do, what you have is they're not a creative people; they're an imitative people because they're cognitively feminine. So you look at where this stuff comes from. Almost all the stories are Egyptian. The stories that aren't Egyptian are either Mesopotamian or Persian. The Persians invent the good God, the God of truth and wisdom, whatever.
Specifically, what are you referring to?
Zoroastrianism.
Right.
All right, and so that's where that comes from. And then the Jewish is just the feminine oppression narrative. And so so they care. What's the unique part about it is that the Middle East uses mythicism, right? It's like we use philosophy, we use science and philosophy. Chinese use, there's no word for it, but it's technically wisdom literature, which is different from philosophy. We call it philosophy because it's their equivalent of it. Right?
Yes.
Both the Indians use mythicism, but that it's not authoritarian. right? And the Jews and Muslims and Christians got authoritarian
Mythicism.
mythicism. And so the purpose of the original invention of religion by the people who were originally the Persians was to create a separatism from the Indians. And in other words, they wanted to create, and the Jews copied that to
So
create
innovation on the Indian system.
right. And so because they're Indo-European, I mean, we're Indo-Europeans, the Central Asians are Europeans, Indo-Europeans, the Indians are Indo-Europeans, and the Persians are Indo-European. So we have this sort of heroic thing, whereas the Semites don't. They have a submissive set of religions because the vast majority of the people are always under the control of some minority despot.
So it's a imperial situation, an imperial
Nietzsche calls it master slave morality. I don't like that, but it's close enough.
Right, it's domination and submission.
Right, it's dominance and submission, right? And so, the Indo-Europeans developed agency for over nature, and they took that to create gods that were advisory or competitors, or family members, not oppressors. Whereas the Middle East maintained gods as dominators and oppressors, right? And
right, as authoritarian figures.
Right. And so what the innovation is that I would say that where the Christians got it wrong was Nicaea, is they made it into a law. They tried to make Christianity
authoritarian function.
Authoritarian. And so this is where it goes wrong. Seriously wrong. And it's where they have to bring in all the Old Testament stuff or whatever. When if they just left, I mean, it's the story of Jesus is simply the feminine peasant, feminine I mean submissive version. It's the feminine inversion of the Greek story of Achilles. It's just a mirror image. They don't invent anything. They just look at a thing and say, how do I resist it? And so that's what they came up with. It was pretty good, really. The trick is that it turned out to be, that resistance turned out to be a good thing by accident. In other words, their method of sedition, which is what Christianity was an attempt to produce Jewish sedition, the way Judaism had been seditious against the Egyptians and the Persians. They were trying to maintain separatist sedition as a means of warfare, basically using their method, and it was extremely successful. The difference is, it turns out that it's actually the answer to the prisoner's dilemma. Christianity actually is the fucking answer. It's just so weird to me. It's so weird. Anyway, that's what makes humans wonderful, is we're like clowns stumbling in the dark, and we still manage to get it right once in a while.
It's like, just give it enough, it takes time, and then it's disambiguation through continuous recursive disambiguation. Come up with
if you just stuck with Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Epicurus, this was the Stoicism, and Jesus, you'd have had the whole class structure. It would have been fine. But this whole thing of we got to make it into like truth and law, we got to bring this Middle Eastern mythicism into the West, and we've got to kill aristocracy, we've got to kill reason, we've got to kill philosophy, we've got to kill rule of empirical law. I mean, what happened is that they tried and they failed because the church was co-opted, taken over by the aristocracy. And so we eventually ended up Germanizing this Semitic religion into something that was great, just as good at oppressing our peasantry as were the Middle Easterners, especially the Egyptians, because that's what it's for. It's not to give you agency. It's not to give you literacy. And what are the Romans doing? They're like trying to make people read. It's not to make you prosperous. It's to get you to submit so you can be extracted from by a priesthood, by a clerisy, by what we call credentialists. And so this is why, so people want to look back and they want to protect their investment in these historical institutions. Now I think, well, I don't have the right to do that if I'm going to claim I'm going to say the truth. I'm trying to solve the freaking problem. The problem is that Jesus as a philosopher was right. Right. The rest of that stuff that they put on it, that churchy stuff, that's no good. Having a God turns out to be not only good but possibly necessary, a means of commensurability. It might be better to have a God that wasn't evil, which the God of the Bible is, right? And it matter to have a good God, right? Or at least a God that was trying to get you to turn into him rather than a God that was trying to make you follow his will. But so I'm not really, so when you come back and say about Abraham, that's what we call it, the Abrahamic religions. We call Chinese philosophy Confucian, the Confucian canon, right? We call Western philosophy, the beginning of Greeks, and everything's a footnote to Plato and Aristotle. Right? This is what we do. So the Abrahamic religions are the inventors and carriers of the synthesis of Greek systematizing, Greco-Roman systematizing, and European and Semitic mythicizing. And so they try to create the system of law. Well, that's where this Jewish stuff comes from, is it comes as a reaction to that Christian synthesis, not the cause of it. So this is where
Now, we were talking about post the destruction of the temple after the Romans destroyed the temple. That's yes, and I would not argue with that.
And so what I'm trying to get at is that just as there are when we look at grammars, there are a finite number of tools you can use to overload human reason.
Right.
Overload human sense, perception, integration, prediction, reason, calculation, and computation. You can overload that. There are only so many techniques because we only have so many faculties to overload. We could enumerate those faculties. The men have been doing it with all sorts of bullshit for a long time.
Yes.
Right? Because systematizing is the Western way. And it turns out it's relatively close to the Eastern way. They're a little further behind, but the interesting thing about the Indians is they systematized a class function, which is really weird to me. But I just find it fascinating that shit works. It's just amazing to me. It's so complicated. It's so complicated you couldn't think of it. I mean, that's what's. I guess that's the net result of it. It's so effective, precisely because the way it's systematized is unintrospectable. You can't dismantle it. You can get Indian philosophers to talk to you about it, but the depth and richness of it, it's like the Lord of the Rings times, to the 10th power.
Right.
It's just
right. So it's like it requires full immersion times 10.
Yes.
You're going to be overwhelmed and subsumed by it.
And the reason, and you can't argue with something that complicated. I mean, that's one of the reasons that mythilicism is better than reason, than art.
The depth of it, it's not dismantleable.
You can't take the fucking thing apart.
So it's not testable, or it's beyond.
Well, I mean, it turns out, as long as it's as long as it consists of general rules of arbitrary precision, from which, like a Crayola crayon box, my 60, whatever it is, 64 Crayola crayons, I can reach in there and pull out a paradigm for any given problem I have. Of course, they
Right.
don't have 64 colors. They've got like 1,924,000.
So it's like it tells you what to do in any circumstance because it's obvious to you because that's just how we do it.
Right, and it's internally consistent, even though Kurt Doolittle cannot figure out what its internal consistency.
Wait, and everybody agrees.
Yes, it's because it actually is internally consistent. When I say I have to go there to figure it out, it's because I can't figure out what's internally consistent. It's like Germans. It took me forever. I still am not sure I get it. Right, but India is like, okay, whatever Germany has got, India has it like to powers of 10, because I just can't take it apart. And when you listen to the Hindu scholars, the people who actually know this stuff, it's so fucking elaborate that the leap between what they're telling you and some first principle is so many layers. It's like I can't see the pattern between what he's saying and the next thing he says. I'm like, I know there's a pattern there, right? Because you can see it in their behavior, and in their behavior, Indian behavior, except for their dirty, is pretty good. No, I mean it's a problem of a hot climate. I mean, it's not.
I say the same problem is going to occur in Germany.
Well, yeah.
And that's a cold climate.
So anyway,
right. Sorry for that.
I don't think it's sorry. I think it's a great a great thing to discuss because it's a common objection. I'm like, dude, I'm a Jeffersonian, right?
Yeah.
Jefferson took what Jesus said. He said, this is the Bible. This is all there is. Everything else is bullshit, right? And I'm like, Jesus was right. And I'm not saying that because I have faith. I mean, I still believe in God, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying that because I'm a scientist and he's right. And that sorry, there's no other solution to the problem of scale of cooperation than what he said. And furthermore, there's no other way of tolerating European OODA loop, which is maximization of evolutionary computation, unless we're exhaustively caring for each other. There's just no other way to do it. Evolution is too brutal.
Yes.
Truth is too unpleasant. That's the beauty of it, is that it makes it so we're always
wait. It's like the only other option is to physically conflict with those who will kill you.
Yeah, I mean it just fucking, it's brilliant. It's the only way, it's the perfect sedation to continuous change. Love. What is a mother doing? That's what she's doing. She's taking a child who's subject to continuous change and continuous pressure to change, and she's providing the support and love and service so that you can tolerate the change necessary for you to become an adult. I mean, a good mother, right? What do you think Christianity does? It's the same thing. We can, that's why we can change our society overnight. It's Christianity. Now it's not churchianity.
Yes.
Right? It's the imitation of this fucking guy. Right? Right? It's it. It's just, he's basically a hippie.
Yep.
Right? And the hippie, and I was like, I love the fucking hippies. They're wonderful, right? Just free love, sex, whatever. Take care of each other. Turns out they're right.
I gotta get Kurt back. Get Kurt back on the road here.
Well, I mean,
because we're on a reverie about the hippies in their little Volkswagen buses, man.
I remember the roads being, because I live from New York. I remember the roads being full of these cars going to Woodstock, and I was a little bit jealous until I saw the videos. I'm like, I would not be able to handle that. I was too young to. But anyway,
here we are back on the road.
All right, so
We're going to talk about some lying.
so I was trying to set this up as we've gone through. Now I lost. See, now I lost my narrative. So we've gone through what are the sex differences in lying. We're going to put them in a competition. We're going to show that they unify at the bottom in the unification of male and female, and the unification of female empathizing and male systematizing. And that unification is what we call the Marxist, neo-Marxist, postmodern, anti-man, or it's really just undermining. It's warfare against the institutions of cultural production that permit the continuous adaptation to the world as it is. It's cancer.
Okay.
So what I did is I said, okay, well, let's look how are we gonna present this information. So I went and collected the information that I've got up there. And I said, okay, well, we've covered, where's my, I want to cover the female first because it's the part we need to understand, and then we'll fill in the male. So can I share my screen now?
I think so. I'll check. Oh yes, it's you're the host.
I'm the host. So this is the outline I put together. Now what we want to do is we want to fill in this thing, right? Is that our triangle?
Yes.
Our diamond.
Yes.
And so we don't have a smaller version of our, I don't have a smaller version of our diamond. Our diamond is here. Right?
That's right.
You see it? So empathic lying, systemic lying. These are, as we go upward, these are markets. In the middle is amoral or boycott, and down in the bottom, or boycott would be down here, right?
Yes.
And this at the bottom is warfare, basically. Right, male and female. So now we've got to discuss the female methods of lying, but to do that, I want to be apologetic, an apologist first.
All right.
And that is that, as we remember when we went over to PowerPoint, all female behavior originates in the division of labor between males and females, which is the need for being a mother, right? You need to be a mother for children.
Right. So a female has a potential to be a mother for children, and therefore it's necessary for her to be hardwired to deal with children and nurture and care for them in order to preserve the race.
Correct. So when our favorite ladies talk, what you notice is that they are they have a reaction to the truth, right? And so they are, what is driving the female reaction to truth?
It seems like it's restrictive of their capacity to provide empathizing and sympathizing sufficient to handle the momentary needs of the people they're attempting to care for.
Correct. So what we see is they have we call them irresponsible, but that's false. It's narrow.
Right, in time.
right? And that's because children fragile in time, right? Hence infant child mortality.
Yeah.
So basically, if you make it in the ancient world, if you make it to 12, you make it to adulthood, you're probably going to live a long time. The problem is it's really hard to get there. That, and you're very likely your mother's going to kill you anyway. See how I snuck that in there? So they have narrow responsibility. So what are they responsible for? They have to maintain control over offspring by seduction, care, protection. Sufficient, right? And so what they're trying to do is they want to.
I want to introduce in time to that series there. Because the time series, the time element is going to be critical to all of it.
Right. Because it's a division, because the division between the sexes is a division of labor and time, right? Perception, cognition, labor, time. So the problem is
She cannot afford internal consistency.
And there's a competition. Right.
Yep.
Right. And so there's the positiva is she's trying to sedate I think this one's the one I noticed most important. They have to sedate, so children are continually have to be
Yeah. So I don't like the word necessity in there. That's it doesn't make sense to me. It's like it's the pain of this continuous adaptation, right? Or the
stress.
There you go.
So we call this encouragement.
That's right.
Right. So the problem is because of children's neural economy.
Yes. That's right.
Right. And so what a woman needs to do is find ways of, women need ways of overloading children's neural economy such that the stress of continuous adaptation is supplanted by tolerance and confidence.
All right. Adaptation.
All right.
The one above there is not spelled correctly. Right above change. So it's overloading their neural. It's really. I want you to put neural economy in parentheses. It's their impulses. She's overloading their impulses. Right? So that they don't act out. They keep on persisting in the behavior that she's preferring.
Mhm. What happens is we like abandoning neural.
There's a self-abandonment.
So if you understand this problem, that's the origin of all what we consider stupid, neurotic female behavior. And trait neuroticism,
Right, they're on a spectrum of neuroticism. Right?
yep.
Okay. What's that mean? Okay.
So if I get this across, what a woman needs to use, she's a woman, women need to use empathy to grasp emotional states and use words and actions and care for words and actions to overload emotional states to produce
Preferred behaviors.
preferred behaviors, self-regulate, all of which
Well, that's, yes, that's the intention. And there's a progenerative function there that's implied.
say that again.
There's a intentional function there that's implied, which is the child will grow up and be able to take care of himself later.
Yes, I didn't get there. So we perceive I don't want to get that. I want to say that again so that I jumped ahead. I don't want to do that.
We presume the child will, in time, grow up and be able to take care of themselves. Over time, will grow up to be able to take care of themselves in time. So there's a presumption of developmental presumption. over time.
So what we see, so we perceive
Wait, we is who? There you go. I think I would say this, so this female behavior becomes antisocial when outside the domain of children, when applied outside the domain of children. That's quite interesting.
so this is it's like you want them to be women. I mean, women are good things when they're women and doing women things. But whenever they go into the workplace, so
Want you to,
whenever they go to workplace, into politics, and
Yep.
anything of scale, they tend they it's like
social scale.
right? Whenever they do anything at scale, they're infantilizing rather than. So, that's what I want to get at.
I want you to put it's there's a yeah there you go. So above there, outside the domain of children, right? They're infantilizing adults, which is out the right, and the applied outside of the domain of children. This is I want you to put a new sentence up there that's in parentheses that says it's free radicals.
I don't understand that.
You don't understand that?
I know what a free radical is. I don't know why.
No, it's a free radical. It's like what you've done is you've got a you have a dangerous, destabilizing element within the
Right.
operating structure
So
that is destructive.
so I asked, so some moment, why shouldn't we care about how someone feels
Wait a minute.
in the
This
workplace?
is like goes to your bad questions, right? There's got to be bad questions for women because we got the bad questions for men. Why don't we just kill you and take your stuff? Why don't we just not care about you and leave you by the side of the road? And that happens, right? Why shouldn't we just abort you right now?
Yeah, there's something, it's called, it's an intrinsic relation. The problem of intrinsic.
I want you to make this, I want you to, oh, since I don't have your book to refer to, I can't do it for you. I would be happy to do it for you, but I don't have the capacity to find the bad questions for men. Why don't we kill you and take your stuff? Why don't we kill ourselves? And it's like this, there's gotta be a similar bad questions for women that will play into this. Does that make sense? Because they're different. They're different.
I know you're right, but I need to figure out how to get there.
Okay.
How are they?
I'll help you, but it's like that's we don't have to do that now.
I don't know. That's a really good thing to go through right now.
Okay. I'm happy to do it too. Watch.
Can I pause and get a coffee?
You're the host. I just work here.
Okay, so we're gonna pause for a minute, come right back.
I'll finish my coffee and start my new coffee. Did you pause?
Where's the?
Oh my, look at the lower part on the right.
Okay, so I'm gonna pause.
We're
Okay.
back.
We're back. Fresh coffee. I ate a bagel. Yay. All right. So what I was trying to do, what we picked up, which is probably not too long ago for the audience, is I'm trying to say that there's a reason women behave the way they do. And it's good. It's just not, you don't want to go to war against children, and you don't want to mother polities. I mean, it's pretty, it's pretty obvious. But unfortunately, what's happened is, to some degree, we've demonstrated what happens when women get to mother a polity, and it's turned out to be catastrophic. So we have to recognize what happens now when women mother a polity. Because
Should we discuss it in detail?
I don't understand the question.
What happens when mothers mother a polity?
Infantilization.
Okay.
Right. So what's happened is we've let this happen. And one of that you could say it, the positive way to look at it is we've run a test. That test of female inclusion has turned out to show that women's intuitions are not, women have not yet got the norms, traditions, and values necessary to control their intuitions when applied to a polity.
I would so I would ask if this question, which I think will lead to the right answer, which is this. My impression is that since 1965 approximately, the war on poverty, the welfare state, is the expression of the failure of infantilization of the populace or the polity.
Correct.
Is that what you were referring to? Yep. That was for the audience more than for you, Kurt.
Thank you. And it really got worse under Obama, which is where this 90s shit came from. And so this whole woke and whatever, it's just really gotten out of hand. And if you read Jonathan Haidt and what's his name's book, I can't remember. It's the most recent one.
I don't know the one.
Books by John, Jonhaidt, and it's at Google, and it's going to be The Coddling of the American Mind, 2015. Yes. And so in that book, he and whoever this guy is that brought him the idea, because it wasn't his original, is that the two of them worked on it, and they said, well, it begins with this overprotectionism. And I'm like, well, that's true, female overprotectionism got out of hand in the 90s, but that had to do with the things that were set up before that, creating an environment where women felt like they needed to be overprotective. And then the woke movement builds from there on top of it. So, and then the white women captured the woke movement, and Jesus, it's just gotten.
There's a progression there that I wanna pursue a little bit, which is, okay, postmodern, political correctness, woke. Is that there's some progression there? Am I capturing it correctly or sufficiently?
Well, I mean, it's Marxism, neo-Marxism, postmodernism, anti-male feminism, political correctness, and woke, and it's just the same attempt to create an oppression narrative in order to resist the demand that people join the majority middle class society by adopting majority middle class responsibilities. And they don't want to. They don't want to, and partly they can't. Worse, if you take women and make them single mothers, they definitely can't. So you're going to get, so it's not just that there's this cognitively female ideology of oppression out there, rather than the long march to domesticate human beings from barbarians into civilized people, and from civilized people into majority middle class people who are, by virtue of being majority middle class, responsible for self, family, assets, commons, and polity, which is what we want, majority responsible society, is that they're retaliating against that, because responsibility is effort. It's cognitive work, it's emotional work. It's adversarial and competitive. Now, the counter proposition, the one I argue with, is that that in the ancient world, through all of history, we've had barbarians, slaves, serfs, freemen, citizens, and sovereigns. And those are basically a hierarchy of what you can be responsible for. A slave is basically responsible for nothing except whatever he's assigned. A serf is responsible for feeding himself, but his work is apportioned. Freeman, his work is apportioned, and he's responsible for feeding, housing himself, it's whatever. A citizen is responsible for the organization of some sort of production, meaning other people who are equally responsible for themselves, their production. And a sovereign is responsible for the organization of those people who are citizens. So it's just a hierarchy of responsibility, but given one's demonstrated competency. So it's just parenting, which is what they call paternalism. And if they want to call paternalism parenting or adulting, I don't know what the heck, or governing or ruling, I don't know what the difference is. It just means we organize society by what you're capable of and willing to be responsible for.
They call it it's not paternalism, it's close. They call it the patriarchy.
Yeah, it's called responsibility. And what do we say women's primary driver is? It's the evasion of responsibility, so that their responsibility is limited only to that which is under their empathic control, meaning themselves and their children. And even then, they eschew responsibility at all costs. What do you think the whole point of hypergamy is evading responsibility? So the thing is, men need to demonstrate competency, and women are intrinsically valuable. And so as such, men seek responsibility as a demonstration of competency, which is why our men are frustrated today, is because they have no means of getting responsibility, because the economy has been sufficiently outsourced that men who have don't have the ability to manage capital can't manage self and work and family. So basically, you're screwing our freemen.
Yes.
So whereas women are basically avoiding responsibility, and even everything you think of, even when they say they're trying to care for someone, they're avoiding the responsibility of having to feel that person's feelings. I mean, they were always avoiding responsibility. What we want, of course, is women who have enough children to develop the male the equivalent of male judgment of responsibility, so they can dismiss the difference between that is which is actionable and that is which is not. So, I mean, women need to learn the four agreements, and they need to learn the simple messages: what is within my control? If it's within my control, then I should worry about it. If it's outside of my control, I shouldn't worry about it. If it's without my control and my competency, I should not even have an opinion about it. The problem is we have an awful lot of women for whom they are both, it is outside their maturity and outside their competency, and they are expressing political interests. Why? Because some people, we call the credentialed classes, who are equally irresponsible for production, distribution, and trade, safety, production, distribution, are being promising these people that they don't have to be responsible. Whereas instead, what we need is we need to produce sections of the economy, sectors of the economy that serve the ability for people to hold different levels of responsibility. Does that mean a return to serfdom and slavery? No, but it does maybe return to public workforces and of two different kinds. One in which you have some freedom to choose what work you do, and others which you don't. And so we have to find some way to make people useful and responsible, because otherwise they seek to justify their irresponsibility, and they will use the political system, the openness of our trifunctional political system, to chase after the approval and leadership of people who tell them they don't have to adapt and improve, which basically means the left. I'm sorry, did I go on a rant there?
That was a wonderful little rant. I hope that my dear friend Martin finds it useful and interesting to clip out and put into play.
So I don't, when I say women are irresponsible, are men responsible for children? No, they're not. We don't take into consideration the adaptive cost of impulse and emotion. Women do.
Right.
And so they take this into account. And the problem is that they don't say, they try to evade responsibility for assisting people in adaptation, instead of saying, I recognize this and taking responsibility for helping people adapt. And so this is why women cause decline in competitive decline in all organizations, is because the purpose of competition and pressure is to cause you to take initiative and responsibility for your own adaptation to change. What women are doing is they're trying to soften or eliminate the need for individuals to adapt to change. And then the result is they produce infantilization, which as a result produces the inability to compete, because what we are trying to train everybody to do is to cooperatively compete, co-opetition. That's the whole point of Western Civ, is we push responsibility down to the maximum. So if I get this across, what I'm trying to get across on our little grid here.
Okay, we're not sharing the screen.
Okay. So what I'm trying to get across on our little grid here, can you see this screen now?
Yes.
Is is this. I'm trying to get across that that we seek a political responsibility here, which is to maximize responsibility, and we seek to minimize responsibility here. So this is responsibility just for the defense of children from change that requires their adaptation, which puts the pressure of their adaptation on the women. That's what's driving their behavior, because they see the world empathically. They have a great deal of empathic information. So when they see it, they observe it the way we see threats, right? We see physical, territorial, disgust threats, and they see adaptive threats. They don't want to change. They want to consume. They want to expand their resources, but they don't want to modify their intuitions. And
no, it's too much work.
it's too much work.
So it's responsibility. So this is interesting because it's like if you look at that responsibility scale, right? So it's scale of response. It's like that. There's a scale of time which extends from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, expanding.
Yes.
In time to overtime, and the responsibility of scale of social responsibility expands in the same direction. From left to right, from small scale of social responsibility to a large scale social responsibility. Nuke out some of those lines there. There you go.
Right.
That's it.
And what did you say about responsibility?
The scale of responsibility, social responsibility. So scale of social responsibility. Expands in the same direction.
Right. Those are the two things you're trying to get me to add there.
Yeah, just to get cause the it's interesting, the time scale and the cooperative scale increases in both to the right.
Oh yeah, of course, right. Empathizing individual, systematizing scale. So we want to have markets, and then I need a little arrow. Where's draw? There we go.
Uh-oh. It's getting all exciting.
I don't know about that.
Oh, that was good. So increasing scale of markets, or this is that's like that will be like division of labor.
Well, I mean, we have right. You don't do anything. Cooperate between individuals, group, family, society. Not society. Private markets,
Community.
public markets, political markets. I mean, go up the whole scale. So I want to put all the methods of organization, family, etc., on this graph. So there's just, you're saying that it's not the greater the difference. I keep trying to say this: the greater the difference from here to there, the greater the energy capture there, right? This is just energy. That's evolution. And so you have empathizing in time, right? Which is systematizing over time. You have amoral cooperation up here, and amoral to evil down here.
Yeah.
All right. And so now I don't view it as, I mean, it's really interesting. The thing we've got here is this female method of empathic lying and systemic lying that we're working on now. We made some progress with this because guys started copying it and making their own versions of it. So I mean,
good.
I have
It's like that. It says inspirational is the word.
Right.
Because it's like I would look at this diamond as a biological basis of understanding animal behavior. Parasites exist at the bottom. We just call them evil because we don't like them.
Yeah.
It's a preference. Right?
Yep.
Because they outgroup the other groups because they call themselves a different species. And those lions they should learn how to eat vegetables. What?
Lions
I
learn.
snuck that one in, didn't I? That one was me doing the job. That
I can't. I can't even. I can't. That I can't go. Any.
Speechless. He's speechless.
Wait a minute. I just did the wrong thing again.
You did something
So I want to do.
so complex.
And then I want to screenshot it because the annotation doesn't work the way you think it would.
Ever.
And so I'm going to go back here. And I'm going to go to the eraser. Annotate. And I'm going to go clear. Clear viewers drawings. Okay, I don't see that. Clear my drawings. Yay! All right. All right. So, okay. So, I'm trying empathizing, consumption, empathizing, responsibility. Do we have those three down? Right. That's really the issue. And scale. Right. Empathizing is a scale issue. So empathizing, consumption, empathizing, and scale.
And there's a time preference there too.
Right. It's a short time preference because children are perishable. Right. They're
yes.
Right.
They're going to go bad.
Right. In the male society, some of us are expendable. Right. Right. So
I'm sorry.
It just is. And so some of us will die in war, et cetera. Right. And so that's but that's a long-term question. In other words, males can vary up. We can handle variation, or bigger too, and so we can handle some variation. We unfortunately absorb more cellular damage, and we have less ability to repair it, which is why we don't live as long. Oh, it's good. So the next time a woman says to me, "I want equal pay," I'm like, "Well, why?" You know, so I want equal lifespan. Does that mean we need to start killing you 8 years earlier? Right? I mean, I want equal life. I'm just like so stupid shit. Anyway, so maintain. So what I tried to get across here is women's behavior is evolutionarily rational. Evolutionarily necessity. Excuse me. Evolutionary necessary and evolutionarily explicative. It's the misapplication of their behavior outside of its domain of competency. Right now,
that becomes problematic.
Right. And so how do we prevent male misapplication of outside of their domain of cognitive competency?
Beat them down.
Well, we make them demonstrate in order to get responsibility.
They don't get responsibility until they show they're capable of managing it, and they lose it when they lose it.
So how do we do that with women? See, the problem is we coddle them, right? We coddle women, and we coddle.
We men coddle women.
Men coddle women. Women coddle women too. I mean, that's the whole point. Is that we've got great great research on this. Men and women both coddle women in the workplace. Nobody coddles men.
Right? I'll agree with that.
Yeah. So one thing is we need to do is we need to stop coddling women so that they learn responsibility.
Huh.
The second thing is we make them demonstrate responsibility. Now we have an interesting difference in responsibility. It's an interesting issue. So my view is that women can't demonstrate conceptual responsibility in politics until they've had X number of children. And even then it's questionable. In other words, only about a third of women ever get to the point where they're able to what we call think about politics, any kind of system. And 2/3 don't, and of that 2/3, 1/3 is permanently crazy.
I would say there's for the women that they when they think of systematization, they think of systematization in empathic terms,
Correct.
which is to say it's not simply, it's not like it's wrong, it's just misapplication of the systematization.
It's resistance to change rather than success at change.
Mm.
So the women are trying to measure change as a negative, and men are trying to adversarially produce change.
Because this is interesting, because it's like the women recognize change or the demand for change as a cost.
Yes, and men see it as an opportunity.
And they don't care. And the women care.
So it is really interesting. The first thing to do is think, how would they feel about that? It's not whether it would work.
The truth of it doesn't really matter. It's going to make somebody feel bad, which is it goes to the feels reals.
Right. So the argument of feels and reals is actually correct. The problem is women perceive this as a value difference rather than a necessary difference.
Wait, a value difference. What do you mean by that?
Well, they seem to universally, almost universally. Yeah, they go one way or the other. They go to that of authority. Hold on, I want to capture that. I notice this in business where they'd always say, well, we have to worry about that. No, we don't. We don't have to worry about how people feel. We have to worry about giving people the knowledge and direction so that they do change. So what does that tell a woman she has to do? She has to direct rather than advise. But she's evading the responsibility of directing in order to advise. You're going to find that everything's reducible to an evasion of responsibility. The cost
they direct and advise.
Right.
It's not responsible because they're directing someone who's responsible.
Correct. So it's very interesting. Like I've had so many women tell me not to do things because it makes people feel bad. And then when you do it, the people love it. Like I did open public reviews, right? You all review each other. And people would get hard reviews. Right? They would get good ones. And then somebody give them a hard review. Now you would think that that would be bad. Turns out, no. It turns out that people freaking love it.
Well, I know what to work on now.
Not only know what to work on, it's like I don't have to hide it from anybody. And the answer is somebody gives a shit about me.
They're paying attention, right?
Right. And so and I would give my, of course I do my management thing as a classroom. And so I'd go through what we're trying to accomplish and change and educate. And I would tell people painful truths. And they was like, wow, that really, you shouldn't say that. And I'm like, well, I'm doing my job. That's to say it. And it turns out it's always right to do it. So why are they doing it? Because they don't want the responsibility of saying it or doing it. When I say everything women do is to evade responsibility, another reducible to responsibility evasion, this is what I mean.
What's interesting, because I'm looking at this, it's seeking to have covert influence as opposed to overt responsibility.
Correct.
Yep. It's blame avoidance, right?
That's actually the word we use in when I was taught personality profiling.
Yeah.
That's the word we use, is blame avoidance. So when I said all the stuff women do that we think is sweet, is it?
Oh, I heard you just stepped on the toe of somebody's sacred cow.
I just, it's like, that's why I said, I wish I didn't do this work because I don't want to know this.
It's too late now.
I love women. I think they're wonderful. I want to have as many as possible. Everyone should own one.
My,
Oh, come on. You knew that. You had to see that.
that was coming.
You had to see something like, I was going to pull some nonsense like that out. No, I mean, women are fucking awesome. I love women. But when you realize that there's an interpersonal relationship with a woman and a familial and a neighborly, right, that's different from a social, economic, and political relationship. And I don't want to know this.
That's right. Well, there's an interesting function, which is there's an illusion there, a presumption which is being played upon that they're not different.
Say that again. That was smart.
There's an illusion that the relationship between anybody and women, a woman or a women, is not different between the local familial level to the political market level. Does that make sense? I didn't say it as well the second time.
No, you've got an insight there, but we got to put it in terms that.
Right. So there's a presumption, a false presumption,
that men and women are equal.
their relationship scale.
Whose relationship?
So the relationship between women and people.
Population?
People, just people. Scale. There you go.
So what we're trying to.
Oh, you just described it. That's perfect market description. Supply and demand on both sides.
It is, and that's why it works. It works if we divide our labor. The problem is we've created this system and no means of compensating for male systematizing versus female empathizing when we're talking about scale.
Okay, so I want you to specify that last sentence, because that was understandable, but not, it was too general.
Okay, so women vary less than men.
Okay.
Nature, evolution specializes on the Y chromosome. Women capture innovations in the Y chromosome. and repeat it.
Yes.
So males are the source of innovation, adaptation. Women are the stabilizing function between generations. Try to capture what's good and persist it, and avoid what's bad and not persist it. How did you just describe this to me? What do you want to do?
The relationship between is the scalability of the
So
function. Yeah, empathy.
Empathizing is by definition an individual on individual metric.
It's micro cooperative.
Right. And so it's like having the difference between measuring in millimeters and miles. So one can identify small variations in preferences, and this facilitates local cooperation at local scale. It's why you want to have women salespeople, or especially when things are marginally indifferent. You want to have male salespeople when things are marginally different. So, it involve a lot of risk. So, women are really good at empathizing, and they're really good at discovering others' wants and finding out how to fulfill those wants with whatever resources are available. This is pretty good. However, you can't generalize individuals. In other words, we say this we say it this way, is that you can describe a class by the common properties of its individuals, but you can't describe an individual by the common properties of its class. Men think in classes, and women think in individuals. And this is that's what the difference is between empathizing individuals and classes. When women try to empathize with groups, they pick the lowest common denominator, the fringe. This is what manifests as what we call naxalt-exalt. Not all X are like that, or all X are like that.
Exalt is the way the women think about it.
Women think about it. They will counter signal with either technique, but most commonly you'll see is naxalt. Not all X are like that. Well, that's a stupid thing to say. If I say women do, or men do, or Europeans do, it's a BFN, a big effing number, right?
Yep.
In general, the distribution will be largest at the way I describe it. What a woman will always do is like say, not everyone is like that.
Right.
What she means is, I don't want to change. That's what that means. That's all that means. I don't want to be responsible for getting someone else to change. I don't want to be responsible for identifying that someone should change. Evasion of
so I don't want to be seen agreeing with the premise that someone should change.
Correct. I mean, that's all they do is avoid responsibility. All of it. That's all they do. And so when I said this to you, I think last fall, and I don't think he gets what I'm saying here. I'll save this one, right? But I've said it a couple of times, and I says, you don't understand that everything women do is reducible to the evasion of responsibility, and that's what I hated learning.
Blame avoidance.
It's just blame avoidance, right? And so, and when we get,
I understand why you didn't want to learn that.
Exactly. I don't want to.
Now, I probably resisted learning it because of that. It's irritating. It's like,
no,
I have women that watch me and they don't want me to learn it either. And they don't even want me to be seen agreeing with it, to be honest. I'm pretty sure that's acceptable. What a world.
This would mean that women who are extremely empathic, extremely sensitive to differences, because that's what it allows, to find differences, it would put them in, it would put them in position of having, like, when we say men vary more than women, but women are more sensitive to variations than men. Does that make sense?
That makes sense,
Right? I gotta write that one down because I don't think I've written that one down before.
right? So
Yeah.
there's a spectrum of sensitivity to variation, right?
Yeah. Because we systematize, and so we tend to generalize things. And for guys, that's fine because we don't really care about our differences.
It's okay as long as I know where my place is.
Yeah, exactly. But they're not like that. They care because they don't. The women are always petty. Like petty
Yes,
each other.
petty. So I want to point to this henpeckery. So what is it? That's when they peck the outlier.
Well, it's how they need
Manage
a.
the herd.
Sorry.
There's a herd management issue there, right? How do women have social hierarchy, right?
Yeah. And this is why they have small friendship circles. In other words, men tend to have a few close friends and a lot of associates, right? Like guys can have a lot of friends because we don't discriminate that deeply. We're more, right? Whereas women tend to have like one or two close friends and then a bunch of girlfriends, right? But there's a nasty competition going on all the time. The reason it is that they have hypersensitivity to this status problem, whereas men are just like, okay, I'm below you, that's fine. I just need to know that.
It's okay.
It means if I'm below you, I don't mean it means I don't have to be responsible for this. That's fine, right? I've been telling people this my whole life. I don't think you realize what we're doing, men. We're doing. It's like, okay, do I need to be responsible? I'm only going to be in charge, right? If I can get something out of it, which is one side, or if it's going to be worse if I'm not, right? The younger guys want to demonstrate competency, right? So they try to get in charge, and so we let them have it, right? Go ahead, give it a shot.
With your best shot, brother.
Give it your shot. Like we're like, oh great, because I don't have to do it that way, right? I mean, and then there's things like, no, you can't. I'm gonna own this because this could be bad.
It's too bad if it will be too bad if you fail.
Yes, but there's a lot. I mean, young guys love opportunities, right? You just give it to them, and they just want the opportunity to try. And it's like, well, the problem is a lot of the stuff we do, that's what they're going to do is good enough. In other words, give them the opportunity. I usually assign the same problem to like 3 different people.
Right.
Because one of them will succeed. All right, women henpeck the outlier.
But they not to their face, right?
What I've noticed is women destroy each other in every organization. And this is the difference between male and female adversarial behavior. You want to know this one? Women kill and men discipline.
This goes to the German secret police talking to my associate, the Marine, in if you bust in the room full of terrorists and they're armed, shoot the women first. That's what he said, and my friend laughed, and it's like, and nobody else thought it was funny. The Germans just looked at him funny, like, no, I'm serious. What are you talking about? That's how you do it, because the men are going to think about how to negotiate their way out of this, and the women are going to just start shooting you.
They get yeah. Men are so much easier than women. So that's the problem is women destroy each other and they don't reconcile.
No.
Like I could think of all the guys I got in fistfights with. We were better friends after the fistfight.
All right, because it's like, oh, we solved that problem.
We solved that, and it was okay. And it was okay, right? They just fucking hate each other forever. Women hate each other forever.
There's a okay. There's an interesting.
Why is that? That's risk avoidance.
That's right.
What's the difference between blame avoidance?
Yeah, risk avoidance, right?
Risk avoidance.
I like that.
So how are we getting this point across here?
Yeah, I think so.
The problem with reducibility to first principles is sometimes it tells us things we don't want to know.
Oops. Shit.
And this is the thing I didn't want to know. This is the most depressing thing I've learned by far. It's like, I love my mom. I love my grandma.
Right.
Great. I love my wives, all of them. I love my wags. And it works out. Like
So there's a functioning this infantilized behavior. And I want to talk about it as feminized because it's like it's insufficiently adaptive as to cause young I get my terminology correct here. So it's young impulsive people or just impulsive people behave in a feminine fashion because like these guys that are like they don't get in a fist fight and reconcile, they start shooting and killing people.
Mhm.
It's impulsive and destructive.
But it's fun though, isn't it?
It's barbaric, yes.
Well, you gotta.
We understand one
If you interview those guys, they're having fun.
huh?
Yeah, I just want to get that. I want to get that point out.
Self-indulgent. Self-indulgent is the word we're looking for.
There we go.
So there's indulgent, impulsive.
Okay, so okay, so that's if we've got, I think we pretty much killed that one, right? Okay, so if that's dimension one, right? So dimension two.
Okay. Put risk on there.
What a honest woman will tell you, we're all scared little girls inside.
Huh.
Like, yeah, exactly. And if you just say that, I mean, most guys will be like, okay, I'll take care of it. But then you got to fucking fight the guy. It's like, I'm not going to fight you to take care of you. And if I can't take care of you, I have no responsibility. If I don't have a responsibility, you don't exist because you're not important. Because I only care about things I can be responsible for. Because that's the only way I demonstrate merit. The only way I demonstrate merit is to move up the status hierarchy with men and move up the reproductive hierarchy with women. Duh. It's so simple, isn't it? I mean, we do this, you and I do this, you know, what, three or 4 days a week, right?
Yeah.
It's disturbing how simple it all
It's very simple.
All right.
It just takes a while getting over all your preconceived notions.
Yes.
And sacred cows have to scream and shout and very obnoxious.
I love that we're going through this because now I feel in control of it. I know where I'm going. Okay. So the second dimension is a really interesting one. And this ties into this really smart question you ask. With the bad questions, is that Marx starts out with this wonderful concept called society, as if we're of necessity a group. Now, I'm me. I got a family. Family's got a clan, and clan's got a tribe. A society is a collection of tribes and clans, right? That's otherwise it's not. It's just a clan.
Operational collection of tribes.
So when you put together a bunch of tribes, you have to develop things called norms. When you
That's
have
right.
it inside your clan or family, it's a tradition. But within the cross families, it's norms. Right? So
Okay.
you're developing a means of commensurability across people with different genetic backgrounds or whatever. One of the problems with our modern world is that the female's perception of in-group scales with the norms. Did I say that right?
Okay.
Right?
What does that mean?
It means that if you live in a tribe, her care,
She cares for the tribe.
she care for tribe, and she will not necessarily care for the other tribe. Though what we do see is women tend to cross tribes because they defect. They'll go fuck some other guy and then come back or whatever, but the women tend to defect, right? So women are devoted, but they're not loyal. Men are loyal, but they're not devoted. What does that mean? That mean a guy will go take an opportunistic fuck for the, over here, but he won't leave his wife. Right? A woman is devoted in time, but she won't be loyal
over time.
Right.
So it's a loyalty in time to over time.
Correct. So it's devotion in time, loyalty over time. What's the difference between devotion and loyalty? You pay an current cost for current problems, but you won't pay a current cost for future returns. In other words, it's short term.
Interest. It's interest.
So men will it's like the old argument that so you give your wife a dozen roses, or you give her a car. It's both worth 1 point. You give a guy like a baseball cap, it's worth a point. You give a guy a car, it's worth a shitload of points.
More than a point.
Right. All right.
Just funny. My wife hates flowers, and I've given her cars.
Yeah. Alora loved flowers. I grew up in a business with flowers, right? So I don't necessarily have a fond. I like rose bushes, but I really don't enjoy cut flowers.
Right.
And so what I did is I set up every week or every 2 weeks, I had flowers delivered to her at her office. Right. Man, that was a really good thing. But then she said, but you don't have to think about it. And I'm like,
oh man. It's like, wow. because you have a system in place. That wasn't empathic at all.
I mean, it's just, anyway.
That one made me laugh, man. I didn't expect that. There was this part right here.
Well, I mean, it's like I always tell women the way you make a man successful is you always give him a treat, right? No matter what he does.
I told my sister to talk to my brother-in-law, right?
Yeah.
And touch his arm, and then be distracted and go, "Have you been working out?" Right. And everybody knows it's bullshit, but it still works.
It works. And we love it. Who was I telling? I'm like, I can't remember who it was. It was Amanda, because we would talk about this stuff all the time. You know, go ahead and manipulate me. I love it.
Right.
Right. Men, we love the shit, right? As long as I get hugs, kisses, whatever, touches, or nice words. I get approval. Manipulate me. I don't care. I'm happy. That's enough.
Right. Just fine.
Easiest game. It's an easy game.
I think it's too easy for women that they don't understand that.
Well, so I think, yeah, well, I think some of them do, but they can't, they don't want to understand it. It's the same thing for men. It's like, look, don't tell her no. Right?
Right.
Listen and say, I understand that. And the only reason you say no is I can't or I won't.
I can't provide that, right?
I can't or I won't. But because that's all she wants, right? Figure out what makes her safe and give it to her. If it doesn't make her feel safe, don't do it, right? I mean, there's just, right? And if what makes her feel unsafe is ridiculous, get therapy for her, right? I mean, it's like me going out. My wife never worried about me going out with female employees or business people on a lunch, right? Or anything like that.
Right.
She would never, I would never give her the fucking reason.
Right.
But I mean, if your woman is worried about that stuff, you gotta
therapy demand.
Right. Like, I mean, if I'm taking out, like,
wait, say no more. Just what are we gonna pursue here?
So anyway, so the problem I want to get to is that female radius of blame avoidance.
Oh, that's interesting.
Responsibility is scales. So the problem is they are devoted and universal, not loyal and particular.
Oh my. This goes to tell me why the Marxists do what they do.
This
universalism that is the issue.
This maximizes blame avoidance. Blame avoidance by minimizing responsibility for behavior. All right, so that's what.
There's nobody that gets to blame me because it's universal.
Correct. I mean, think just like I don't want to think of it as I don't want to make any enemies. So
right.
I don't even want, and they don't want it even in their head because they don't want the impulse to come out because they don't want to self-regulate their impulse. So they didn't want to believe it.
So there's a function there that's interesting is blame and risk avoidance and impulse regulation avoidance.
Mm-hmm. I love it when I learned from both Russian and Ukrainian women, this is, I want to be able to feel free to feel. Right? Or my favorite example being a woman's job is to love, a man's job is to provide. And what all they're saying is make me feel safe so I can love. And love means I just follow my feelings. Well, I mean, if we train our women to do that, that would be great. But we've trained them to be men, and now they're unhappy bitches.
What?
To do.
It's because they suck as men.
They suck at it. So this problem is endemic in both Christianity and Judaism and in Marxism. In Marxism, it's his belief that there's a society.
That there is some universal society.
Right. And what he means is debt.
Obligation, right? Duty. It's duty.
Similar, just like mother to children. This is, you see the same behavior and
It's a universal function there that it is
similar to how women often expect men to feel about her children the way she does.
okay.
Right, and we don't.
So this would
I want have I don't want you,
systemic systematization function there.
it's not, it's just pure empathy. It's empathy, it's impulsive empathy.
Okay.
All right, without a threat barrier, there is no barrier.
Oh,
So the problem is, this is just another example of how the devotion behavior doesn't scale. They're relying on feelings that are necessary for children. They're extremely valuable for women with other women with children and their division of labor, but it breaks down immediately after that. Like, it might be valuable. Here's where it's valuable. Let's say you have two tribes coming together. If the women get together and the women will figure out how to take care of all the children together, the men will be fine. Conversely, if the men figure it out, the women will be fine. Very hard to do those two things. So the basic problem I'm getting with is male and female. Let me see if I can get to it. Males systematize and specialize, and women empathize and generalize.
oh, that's not so good.
So
This is where the problem comes in because they're generalizing beyond their scale of capacity.
yes, and women generalize into high social adaptation, but low political adaptation.
Market. They're not specializing.
Women aren't specializing.
Competency, right?
So, isn't it, again, it's really disturbing, isn't it?
Well, it's like what's disturbing about it is it's like this fatal pathway. It's
Yeah.
a fatal pathway and it's unavoidable. It's like it's just how it must have evolved. And now it's like we're at this crisis because the evolution of the situation has now come to the point where it's now time for us to confront this problem and decide how to proceed.
Well, I mean, we can do it. We've proposed the three methods, right?
Right.
Right. The method is, well, of course, let's take the obvious one: remove women from politics. Right. That I'm not in favor of that. The other way is give.
Wait. That requires some bold statement there. It needs underscored because it's like that. Kurt just said one of the options is to remove women from politics, and that he is not in favor of that. For all people who may be paying attention, you may rewind the film a little bit and play it and listen for yourself. It was said in a little bit quiet voice. Sorry, Kurt.
Oh, it's okay. It's just like everybody's gonna always call me a Nazi or no matter what. So I just tell the truth, and then we got to figure out what to do about it. So the first thing is remove them. Okay, well, fine. The second thing is we give them a house. So now women have to negotiate a deal with men. I think that's fine. The third thing is, well, we limit both male and female entry into the houses by demonstrated competency. In other words, you've got to be a
that one strikes of tests at the poll, right?
I mean, just you got property and kids, you're pretty much in, right? I mean, because the point here is we're trying to return primacy to the family as a central unit, not the individual, right? Right, because we're trying to restore cooperation between the sexes. The next thing we do is we eradicate the ability to use the female method of underlining in public speech.
Yeah,
which is what most of my work is focused on. And lastly, we educate people in natural law so they understand these things, right? So they have they're not being oppressed. They're understanding that we're all of us being trained to cooperate in large numbers for the benefit of all. So, I mean, we've talked about lots, all sorts of variations on those things. I have a hard time seeing unwinding the democratic, I don't know, demon. I don't know how you put that back in the box. I think we could probably get away with, in order to vote, you have to be contributing. I think that might be able to be,
I think that's likely to be the outcome here, because it's like, okay, if you're going to be a net drain, you don't get a vote because you don't know how to manage your own house, much less ours.
And if you have juridical defense, that's enough. And then if we eliminate falsehood, I think in other words, eliminate these methods, I think it's fine. The problem is it's going to take time.
That's right.
For people, people to learn that you just can't say what you feel or as a truth. You can only say, I don't like it. And I just think that's a hard thing, but I think that's what changes the course of man back off this bad course.
Bad course. It's I want to think about that because I view it as a crisis, and it's like this. It's not like a bad course. It's just playing in the road.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, we need to stop playing in the road. Okay.
It's like, just, hey, grow up and get out of the road. Good Lord, there's trucks coming.
All right. Boy, that was really good. Did good work.
I thought it was good, Kurt.
I was like, we've been at this for 3 hours now. So is it?
Yeah, I think it's good time to break. It's not a problem.
Yeah. So we've started working again. We started working through the basic problem from the bottom up. I feel like we absolutely killed it on the responsibility question. I don't feel like we completed killing it on the herd versus pack problem.
Yes.
right? That's the second dimension.
So we'll get into that later.
Right. Then we're going to go to the negative behaviors, right? The failure of women to adult, and then what happens when women express this dysfunctionally.
Yep.
And then we're good. Then I have all the pages up we need to start talking about the female method of lying, beginning with the beneficial, right, which is what we talked about, faith healing, beginning with
Yes.
faith healing.
Yes.
Seeking to understand, faith healing. We can go through that series. So it's going to go up is positive and down is negative. Is faith healing a negative? Sort of. It is really. It's a nice way of, it's like a white lie.
That's right. That's
It,
right. It's sort of more toward neutral.
yeah, it's just, it's not really quite true. But it's a considerate dishonesty, right? I mean, right. But then you move down from there into the different escalation points, and we'll cover those escalation points. I didn't know if but I showed you how I've got the table all worked out.
Yes.
So I'll try to create a few more diagrams in here, and then we'll bring the diagrams together and we'll work on that. And so I think I have all the material. So
Yes.
go through it. It's just a really fascinating subject when you work from the first principles like we're doing.
Yes.
It's just, empathy, responsibility, risk, and fear. Right? I mean, and all they're trying to do is make sure that they can preserve all their adaptation to work with children, and that there's a limit to what that has to be, and there's a limit to male systematizing going down to the individuals.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. So they're drawing a barrier, which is you describe as a nuclear membrane.
Yes.
Which is they draw a barrier to men systematizing, so they keep you at bay.
Yep. Which is okay.
It's okay.
So we have to draw the same barrier for their empathizing.
Yeah, you don't get to come out of there and do this craziness.
All right, so that's what we'll pick up on next meeting. I'm kind of wiped out right now.
No, you did good. And it's like, that's episode 2049. So I'm going to ask the nice people, the audience, to hit like, subscribe, not necessarily in that order because I can't see them, and the notification bell, and please comment. We're very happy to read them. It's very interesting to read the comments. I enjoy just checking the videos and looking at what comments have been made. It's interesting. We'll see what Martin does.
All right, love you, man.
All right, Kurt. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.